My name is Connor Flanagan. I'm the Director of Education here at the Southampton History Museum. And this morning I'm joined by my coworker, Zachary Taylor. He's our curator and our registrar. And he's going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into our collection. He is mostly responsible for the deep dives, which is part of our blog / Instagram, Facebook, social media exhibit that we've been doing since the pandemic started, where he's been digging through our archives and our collections, storage rooms, and finding interesting things to highlight for you, the public. And now he's doing a more specific deep dive on vintage toys and games to get ready for the holiday season. So without any further ado, I'm going to throw it to Zach. And if you have any questions throughout this talk, submit them through the Q&A in the chat function, and I'll come back at the end and I'll ask all your questions to Zach. So enjoy, everybody.
Thank you, Connor. Always a pleasure. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to my lecture entitled Games People Played, A Century of Vintage Toys and Games by myself, Zachary Taylor. Between the 19th and mid-20th century, just about both toys and games of all varieties have seen widespread popularity and even continued development. Some of these toys can be seen as precursors for what kind of toys would become popular as time has progressed. Within the Rogers Mansion itself, many toys and games have been gathered, ranging from board games to mechanical stuffed animals. This lecture will discuss quite a few objects in our toy collection, exploring their history and how widespread they were, and their status as collectibles where applicable. So, there are four main categories in which I divided this lecture into, with the groups grouping the following toys being discussed as follows: die-cast toys, tin toys, mechanical / motorized toys, and finally board games. Some of these toys and objects will unfortunately have much of their own personal histories and like finer details, sadly lost due to unavailable maker's marks and such on some of their manufacturers, but exploring them is still vital due to their prevalence and collectability. Other toys will have a much more fleshed out history due to specific manufacturers being incredibly present during their time, with some companies still existing to this day, either in their original incarnations or through just the standard sort of multinational mergers and acquisitions and things like that. Subcategories in each case will also be explored based on how much known history is attached to either each toy or each brand producing toys. So let's get started with die-cast toys. Now, die-cast toys and collectible models are abundant in the collection at the Rogers Mansion. Die-casting itself is based on the shaping of lead alloy or iron into that of a object or figure. The most commonplace die-cast toys during the early 20th century are scale models of automobiles, fire engines, aircrafts, horse and carriage, and also especially trains. Actually, within three of these four categories, trains are going to be coming up quite a few times. A more apt subtitle for this lecture would be Games People Played, comma, I hope you enjoy trains, because I certainly do. So we'll go to the first die-cast toy that we have. This is one of our horse-drawn carriage toys that we have, which is one of many in our collection of this type. It's one of the simpler designs, design die-casts that we have, as it depicts a single silver painted horse drawing a black carriage. The horse is attached to the carriage via two thin metal bars hooked to the front. You will notice the horse is rather worn down with its paint chipped off in spots, as well as the rear wheel of the carriage being a bit lopsided, as you can see in the first picture here on the left. This tends to be the case with these toys, considering their age. We move on to, this is another horse-drawn wagon that we have, a much more elaborate die-cast than the previous one. Here we see a white horse pulling a yellow, oh, sorry. Oh, my bad. When I was editing this in post, I switched around two of the slides. Actually, we will go to this first one here. Sorry, my apologies, folks. This one is a much more elaborate diecast than the previous one. Here we see a white horse pulling a yellow painted wagon with a man as the coachman, as seen in the back. More wear and tear can be seen on this piece, what with paint on both of the horse and wagon chipping away once again. Interestingly enough, the rear of the horse is attached directly to the wagon, as some kind of strange extension, with its own rear being partially painted yellow. The man in the wagon also happens to be a separate piece, with its own rear having a peg that slots into a hole into the wagon seat, thus ensuring that it stays in its place. This was a common feature with these toys, that had people being towed, when they weren't just horses in the carriages themselves. So we go back to this one, which I originally had in front of the one we just had. This is one of the more detailed horse and carriage pieces that we have. In this piece, we have two black painted horses towing an elaborate carriage featuring a coachman and a rider inside. Not only are the wheels of the carriage painted red, but also the wheels, but there is also a wheel that sits between the two horses, that is also painted red, which allows the toy to be much more mobile than previous ones, which just had the feet of the horses directly on the ground. The coachman is once again detachable, as well as the rider, who is painted entirely red, who you can see in this right-hand piece here, a lady wearing both a hat and elaborate dress with a collar and sleeves, and very noticeable buttons on her attire too. So we will jump to this piece here. This is a die-cast model of an old ambulance that was contemporary for its time, painted entirely in white with the exception of the red cross on the side right next to the driver's side window. There are a few chips, of course, in this paint that are also visible, as well as the white tires showing cracks all around on the sides here, as you can see, both where they connect to the rest of the car and also as they extend outward as they touch the ground. And here we have another old service vehicle, namely what appears to be a yellow fire engine featuring a driver on top, adorned with a fire engine's helmet, or a fireman's helmet rather. On the side of the engine is written coal wood. The wheels on the engine are incredibly worn down, most likely from frequent use, deteriorating its otherwise silver color. And of course, the wear and tear is seen on the body of the truck itself. The top of the truck and also the sides housing the wheels are painted red, of course. And there is also appears to be a darker yellow, brownish outline outlining the body of the truck as well. Another variety of die-cast toys comes in human and animal figurines. In our collection, we have a variety of toy soldiers made by the Barclay Manufacturing Company, as you can see here. A former New Jersey-based company specializing in these toys. They were known widely for their what are called dime store soldiers, as seen here, named such for their availability at variety stores or five and dime shops, as they were once called. After getting their start in 1922, they bought out another company in 1939 known as Tommy Toy and created a line of toy soldiers that could be purchased for a nickel each at the time. This is a selection of those soldiers wearing brown uniforms and silver helmets. A few of the toys have their helmets missing, exposing the tops of their heads, which are hollowed inside. The heads and the bodies inside are hollowed, all of which taking up arms of some kind, or indeed lending assistance to their fellow soldiers, that are more in the foreground, manning machine guns and what have you. A more contemporary version of this particular set of toys would be the plastic army soldiers, as we have seen over the last few decades, usually painted either green or tan, I've noticed. Onto the second category, tin toys. Another variety of toys not too dissimilar in the subject material to die-cast toys are the tin lithograph toys, also found within the Rogers Mansion. This style of toy saw painted tin plate-based mechanical toys following the invention of sheet metal stamping very early in the 19th century. This allowed for a mass production of toys that would explode throughout the late 19th and early 20th century from specific manufacturers. These were seen as much more cost-effective substitutions for wooden toys at the time, with lithography used to print designs onto each object. American-based toy companies would take advantage of the ore mines opened in the state of Illinois, for example, while European-based companies would also take precedence in this particular market. Such objects would range, much like die-cast toys, between automobiles, carriages, sea vessels, locomotives, human and animal figurines, and so on. So here we have a steamship that features 3 wheels underneath, allowing for its mobility. It's in this piece that we can actually see the distinction between tin toys and diecast modeling, as the painted side of the ship is much more elaborate than possible on the previous category of toys we talked about. The wheel toward the front of the ship is purposefully misaligned, allowing the ship to bob up and down as it moves forward in order to simulate a ship when it is out on the seas. So, and also, I should mention the two fake gun turrets that are on the front and backmost portions of the ship on the top, with a smokestack right in the center here. This tin toy is of a German touring car, one of the tin toys of European origin, of course. The elaborate design features a roof over the driver's seat, with the rest of the vehicle having a closed interior. This toy originally came with a driver, but he has been lost, unfortunately, as of now. On the side of the door, the number 130 is painted, indicating the model number of this, of course. The top of the car is painted green and the bottom part yellow, with a blue bar extending down the hood and front of the car, as seen here. Ordinary wear and tear features, I suppose you can call them, are seen on the top and on the wheels, of course, and the bars where the wheels are fixed upon. This piece right here is a tin gymnast toy with the athlete holding onto the acrobatics bar attached to a red wheel suspended over a green base. One is this particular toy. With this particular toy, one could twist the wheel on the side of the bar to allow the athlete to flip entirely around the bar, as seen by acrobatic performers. Still functional, of course. It's a fairly simple design, of course. Twisting the wheel twists the bar, which twists the athlete, so he can just spin and flip infinitely as much as your heart desires. Moving on, this is a Paya brand tin sedan circa 1923. The Paya company is a Spanish toy maker dating all the way back to 1902, started by Rafael Paya and his sons. Paya was one of the competing European toy companies, not only with German and French companies at the time, but also with American companies within the toy market. They wound up shutting down during World War II, like other companies did at the time in the area. But later in 1985, many of their toys were being reissued. Many of their toys, such as this particular sedan that you see here, range between the $200 and $2,000 mark as far as collectibles are concerned. This toy in particular features a green body with a black roof, front window and undercarriage. The wheels are painted teal and black. The Paya logo is seen on the doors there that you see. And the driver is rendered varying shades of blue in his attire. Also notable is the fact that the interior is visible in this particular model, unlike the German car that we saw a few slides ago. And also the windshield is rendered a hard plastic, also lending more to the detail of this being a more authentic vehicle piece. Now then, one prevalent tin toy company from the early 20th century is the Lewis Marks and Company toy brand, getting its start in 1919 and headquartered in New York City. Named after its founder, Lewis Marks, they specialized in tin plate lithograph toys. Their logo was prevalent on all of their products. It featured the letters MAR with an X going through it in order to resemble a railway crossing, since locomotive-based toys were a well-known output of theirs, as we will see in a few slides. Every model train line that they produced, beginning in 1934, featured this logo. The following years would see models such as the Union Pacific M10,000, the Commodore Vanderbilt, the Canadian Pacific 3000, and the Mercury entering into the market. Tin plate sets were manufactured until about 1972, when they finally shuttered. There we go. A little delay in the PowerPoint slide. In a previous deep dive, we discussed the Marks railway express truck as seen here, painted entirely green with red bumpers and undercarriage, as well as yellow outlines featuring doors, hood, and grille. An interesting feature on this piece is the raised/lowered ramp on the rear of its truck, allowing for potentially a hand truck or shipped goods to be loaded on. Unfortunately, the handle controlling the ramp does not currently work. It would have to be, I believe it would have to be realigned into whatever slot the bar is located in order to work once again. Once again, this is a piece that I covered in one of my previous deep dives over the summer/fall. This right here is one of the many wind-up tin toys that Marx had produced at the time. This features a late 19th century locomotive towing passenger cars going through 3 tunnels around a town, with elaborate renderings of town folk going in a circle around the base of the toy, with dogs, goats, wagons, and horses chasing one another in a circle. Excuse me, in a circle. Within the rails, quote unquote, are painted cars, churches, bridges, rivers, and even a castle can be seen almost right in the foreground. The central building is the only 3-dimensionally rendered facility alongside the train itself and also the tunnels, as it houses the key used to wind up the toy for the train to circle around. This toy still functions. It just takes a little bit of the train takes a bit of a push to it to finally get going, but it will go for quite a while depending on how much you wind it up. And here's another wind-up locomotive toy by Marx, titled the Honeymoon Express. This particular piece, a much more contemporary passenger train is the feature of this piece, resembling that of many passenger trains that we see to this day. The 2 tunnels are made of stone. The 2 facsimile tunnels present that of stone that appears to have a moss overgrowth in patches alongside all of the pieces here, as well as an elaborate iron bridge going over a river that you see to the left. The vehicles parked next to the 3-dimensional building are of a style from the 1940s. And once again, that interior house in the center houses the key to wind up. Finally, from the Marx collection, we have a toy gas station pump set. These 2 separate pumps are seen here, the blue and gold one featuring motor gas, and the red and black pump featuring red and black pump dispensing ethyl gas. My apologies. 2 signs indicate where to enter and where to exit, stemming the possibility for confusion and traffic at the pump. Presumably, the cars had all of their pumps basically on the same side as one another, or indeed on the rear in some cases, or also in the front in some cases. In the center of the base is a dispenser featuring oil, grease, and antifreeze compound, with the Marx logo itself prevalent on the base of the 2 pumps. Now then, we move on to motorized and battery-operated toys that are also found here at the Rogers Mansion, some of which originating in the 1950s, where a lot of these would have either gotten their start or started gaining more popularity. This decade saw an explosion in the development of mechanical toys utilizing batteries, most prominently toys that were being manufactured and coming out of Japan in many cases. This piece right here is known as Jumbo the Bubble-Blowing Elephant, manufactured in the 1950s by the Aiichiro Tomiyama company, who would later go on to be known as Tomy, a company that still produces toys to this day. As implied in its very name, the tagline on the box and base of the toy reads, "It blows bubbles." Direct marketing never seen before. This fuzzy mechanical elephant, which came in a variety of colors such as brown, gray, and pink, stands on top of a tin base, tin box with an on/off switch. Sadly, the one in our collection no longer functions. Otherwise, this toy would be battery operated. Once activated, the elephant would lower its trunk once switched on, dip its bubble blower affixed to the trunk into a container of soapy water, and move its trunk upwards where air would blow from the elephant. This process would produce the bubbles and would go on until the water was depleted completely. The ears would also flap once activated, and this elephant was known for breaking Tomy's sales records at over 600,000 copies of this toy being sold. Okay, so moving on to, without mincing words, moving on to probably the most horrifying toy that I possibly have ever seen. But that's off the record, of course. This is the Princess French Poodle, also manufactured during the 1950s by the Kragston Corporation, also based in Japan. Adorned in plaid clothes on its torso, as well as a matching pattern hat, the poodle's eyes would light up as it would walk, sit up and down, and repeat these actions when activated. It's controlled by a battery-powered switch attached to a wire affixed to the back of its neck where the collar is located, the switch of which can be seen just to the right of the dog's feet here. The dog's face, head, and legs are covered entirely in a soft fur, with its feet featuring wheels allowing for it to move forward with its motor. Its mouth is also mechanical, presumably allowing it to bark, but no speaker could be found on the animal upon closer inspection. The eyes would also otherwise light up, but without the toy being able to function any longer, it's hard exactly to be sure how illuminated they would truly be. Okay, so returning to the subject of locomotives once again, one can't bring up motorized trains without mentioning the Lionel Corporation. Initially, after setting up a model train known as the Electric Express as a storefront display, the founders Joshua Lionel Cohen and Harry C. Grant became one of the three major US-based toy train manufacturers at the end of World War I. One of the biggest competitors, one of their biggest competitors were American. Some of their biggest competitors, included American Flyer, Ives, and the aforementioned Lewis Marks and Company train lines. Lionel would initially take criticism over its unrealistic paint jobs on their model railways, with the counterpoint being their intended market was children and their parents who would purchase them, namely for either holiday time or for birthdays. After World War II, Lionel's line of trains would become much more realistic, with closer resemblance to real-life locomotives, as well as featuring a special oil loaded in the smokestacks to produce smoke using an electric heating element. Lionel saw its highest profits in 1953, but later on in the decade, its sales would wind up declining. Now then, this particular Lionel engine in our collection is the 259E, a pre-war locomotive from between 1933 and 1942. This particular engine is painted in all black with silver wheels and pipes and a brass smokestack that you see on the top towards the front. The front of the engine should be affixed with a light, but that light is also sadly lost. The Lionel L logo can be seen on the side of where the conductor would be positioned. Additionally, there's also a coal car, which joins the engine that we have in our collection within the Lionel line, with the Lionel Lines title on both sides of the coal car. The ladder and handle are both rendered with a copper color, and both of the engine and the coal car could have, they both had the hooks allowing for them to be joined and link up with additional cars so that the engine would be able to pull the coal car and any cars that would have behind it. Some of those cars include this particular tanker car whose barrel is colored red with a brass top. Again, you see the wear and tear on the tanker in and of itself and on the wheels and such here, as well as the top, the brass top that you see here in the center. Another one includes a livestock car painted orange with a green roof and handles that the sliding door is attached to. The sliding door still functions, of course. That's fairly low maintenance. This particular stock car being number 806, as you see here. The green top also features two brass tops on both of the sides, as you can see. And once again, silver wheels once more with the hooks on both sides. And finally, a dark red caboose with gold railing and ladder on both ends, as well as a green roof and light green windows. This, of course, being the last train cars that would wind up being in the train line when assembling this model. Additionally, in our collection is an American Flyer line express baggage car. Again, one of Lionel's competitors at the time before Lionel had wound up overtaking American Flyer in the market. This car in particular is painted green with yellow borders, as well as red and white text with the model car number 1205. As you can see, the American Flyer electric service logo is featured on these rectangles on both sides of these sliding doors. Sliding doors on both sides, of course, both of them still function, of course, although with a little bit of lubrication would make it easier to get them open and closed. Finally, we move on to the last category in our toy collection, that of board games. In our collection, we own several checkers/chessboards, with many of their respective pieces being mixed into one another's sets. As board games require several pieces to be fully utilized, some pieces have unfortunately been lost over time prior to coming into our possession. One of the most prominent companies whose games reside in our collection are from the Milton Bradley Company, which we will see examples of that shortly. This set is the Junior Auto Race game made by All Fair Incorporated, patented in 1922. The result of a strained business relationship, one Elmer Fairchild created the All Fair Incorporation in Rochester, New York, which focused on toys and games. This company was initially a subsidiary of E.E. Fairchild Corporation, but would later merge back with the corporation back in 1940, with all games and toys manufactured before that time with the All Fair logo. One such game was the auto race game as seen here with its components, whose pieces you see in the foreground, 5 painted automobiles, 6 dice, all bearing specific letters on each side, a player piece or indicator piece here, the box in which the pieces were found, and also a dice shaker as seen in a cylinder tube up in the top right. An incomplete set missing the game's board, sadly. This game could otherwise accommodate 2 to 6 players. Each player is given a car that you see in the foreground. The player uses the 6 dice, as I mentioned, featuring the first initials of specific cars, namely Buick, Ford, Page, Maxwell, Dodge, and Stutz. And the dices rolled would indicate who moves up and by how many spaces. If a player lands on a blowout square, as it's called, they lose the move on the next throw. They lose a move on the next throw. If they land on the accident, as it's called, square, they start from the beginning, and the final car that crosses the finish line would win the game. This would be a little bit more easy to visualize if we had the board in our collection, but sadly, I could not locate where it could possibly be if we do even have it in the first place. So the next piece that we have is the 1930 Milton Bradley Corporation's bingo set, number 4148, complete with embossed calling numbers that are seen on the components inside of the box, which we will flip to here. This high quality bingo set comes with multiple elegantly lettered bingo cards that you see in the typeface used on the front here. A smaller box in which the wooden calling numbers can be stored and shaken up, as well as red wooden markers for each of the players to use. This bingo set is still in quite good condition within our collection. Here you can see exactly how elaborate the embossed wood markings and numberings on the chips can be seen here. One of the more highly detailed bingo sets that I've seen, because I'm very much used to seeing plastic manufactured ones. So these are quite nice aesthetically to look at. Another one of Milton Bradley's games in our possession is the Game of Geography from 1940, with its tagline, "Questions and answers about places and things you should know." The premise is straightforward given the subject matter, with the directions instructing one player to act as the teacher, quote unquote, holding the book of answers, with the rest of the players referred to as scholars, giving sort of a credence to a classroom orientation with this game. After mixing, and as you can see, the front of the box here with the Quiz Me trademark and the Game of Geography title, and on the right that you see the booklet that stretches out to a 4-page pamphlet, the Quiz Me Games Geography directions for players, within the book itself having the answers for each of the questions as numbered on the cards, with the cards being here that the players would collect. After mixing the cards and giving at least 6 to each player, they hold on to them one by one, ask one of the questions to the scholar to their left, and if they can't answer the question, they are given the card. If one scholar cannot answer the question, they give that card to the next scholar, I should say. If the card makes it back to the teacher and goes a full circle, the teacher reads aloud the answer. But if a scholar can answer the question, they get to keep that card, with the scholar having the most answered cards being the winner at the end of the game. Perhaps one of the stranger pieces in the board game collection is the Milton Bradley's educational toy money and the game of banking, this particular model dating 1937. Play money, coins, and currency marketed at children as an educational tool have been a Bradley product since as far back as 1879 in certain incarnations rather. It was after attending a lecture by Elizabeth Peabody, an educator who opened the first English language kindergarten in the United States. Bradley himself, as an attendee of this lecture, used his company to manufacture items to be used in a learning environment, as is the case with the play money set that you see here. Each of the bills in the set reads educational toy money, not negotiable on the front, ensuring that it'll never be used in stores, of course, with the company name and its location in Springfield, Massachusetts, listed underneath. There are multiple $5s and $10 bills in this bundle, as well as cardboard quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies, and half dollars, surrounded in a sort of aluminum design to give the pretense that it looks almost exactly like money until closer inspection is done. There are also many debt payment slips detailing what exact expenses, what each expense is used for, as well as a billfolds booklet included that you see in the top of the box here with the bill collector slips in bundles here and rubber bands. Okay, so the final entry in the board game category is the theme appropriate Townopoly game of Southampton. The publisher Pride Distributors Incorporated, located in Farmington Hills, Michigan, was responsible for many custom board games, done so as a fundraiser in the 1980s for various community organizations. This particular board game is kind of cheating it a little bit as far as the scope of time that I wanted to focus on, but it is, especially in the category of board games, and considering this is in a Southampton History Museum's collection, it's almost impossible to overlook this. So I feel like this as a final entry would be almost perfect, I believe, even if this board game is possibly no older than about 40 years now. Oh my goodness. Anyway, enough agonizing about time. Their Townopoly series was one of their endeavors, allowing townships to contact the company about a collaboration in order to have a board game made for that specific town, Southampton being one of them. Southampton, as one such town, it has its own board game based on it, utilizing a game format very similar to that of Monopoly, as is implied by its title, Townopoly, the opoly suffix being a dead giveaway. The properties and businesses on display in the game are, of course, based on those which existed in the town itself during the time that it was manufactured. Such businesses include the East End Glass Mirror, First Hampton Realty, three separate Hampton Bagels properties, or three Hamptons Bagels properties, one Hamptons Bagels property in 3 locations on one side of the board, as you see here. Windmill Video, an old VHS store, akin to a Blockbuster, of course, and Cynthia's Flowers / Plant Arrangements, to name just a few of the businesses on display. As stated in the rules, the object of the game is to be the only person not to become bankrupt, doing so by buying the businesses they land on and gaining customers as they circle the board. So the pieces that the game comes with include a variety of colored money according to their respective amounts, 2 dice, green and red dots to represent customers that would land on each of the property on the board, and plastic player pieces as opposed to Monopoly's metal pieces. The plastic pieces grouped in with the dice that you see in the little plastic baggie here. So There are also fate cards, Southampton town cards, the rule book, and cards for each respective property, which I will flash up shortly. These are here are the Southampton and fate cards that are on display, yellow and orange respectively, all still attached to one another, thus showing that the game in our collection has not yet been used. Both sets of cards come with their own risks and rewards. On the one hand, you may advance to a specific property, inherit money, or receive a tax refund. But on the other hand, you may have to retreat by a few spaces, pay one of a handful of taxes, pay a doctor's fee, or go directly to Southampton Court. And here we see the property cards for each of these Southampton businesses. You can see a few more of the named businesses, of course. Hampton Bagels having 3 of the cards on the top. East End Glass and Mirror, Dr. Lisa Friscano, and Dr. Brian DeRussa. Cynthia's, Lynn's Cards and Gifts, Storm Motors, Hampton's Tobacco, just to name quite a few more. Once again, each card is still attached to one another, with each of the cards having a customer and bankruptcy value that are listed on the sides here, extending downwards. 0 customers to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to full capacity, and then bankruptcy values consisting cost to obtain each customer and cost to fill clientele. So it's no great surprise that many of the aforementioned toys have been relegated to collector's items by and large, with quite a few of the earlier ones that we mentioned, the tin toys and the die-cast toys, potentially being viewed as potentially unsafe, considering standards for toys these days. With safety standards, manufacturing costs, and profitability in mind, many of these kinds of toys have been supplanted by plastic-based toys, as seen in the present day over the last, once again, 30 to 40 years or so, when these sorts of toys had become popular once again, although in different incarnations, as opposed to iron and tin as they were once made out of. Many of these brands, however, are still seen to this day producing toys and hobby-based objects, such as both Lionel Trains and Parker Brothers, of course, springing to mind. Parker Brothers, of course, still producing board games and things like that. Lionel Trains being still very much a well-regarded model train collection institution, as you may see at, like, say, for example, model railway exhibits or museums or things like that. Which I have a personal fondness for, honestly. That's pretty much my childhood right there. Let's see, what else? It's also become abundantly clear that newer technological innovations overshadow the hobby spaces these objects once dominated. The clearest example being video and computer gaming over the last few decades. I mentioned the toy company Tomy before, Tomy. For a long stretch of time, like beginning in the late 90s, they were manufacturing a lot of Pokemon figurines and toys and just collectibles in their own right. Just to name one more example. Board games themselves have also overlapped with the concept of tabletop gaming, as they call upon similar setups and have increasingly elaborate playstyles, a la Dungeons and Dragons and other adjacent pen and paper games, as well as other vastly more elaborate board games that have been cropping up either through crowdfunding efforts or through that have been existed throughout the 90s and 2000s, some of which being much more elaborate than what I thought Monopoly was back in the day. This, of course, does not stop the toys we discussed today from being sought after for their rarity, value, and cultural prevalence during their respective times. So that concludes my talk on our toy collection here at the Southampton History Museum. Thank you very much for coming, everyone.
All right, that was great, Zach.
Thank you.
I also want to thank everybody for joining us today. And now, if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to submit them either on the Q&A function on the bottom of the screen or in the chat function. And I just want to say thank you for not showing the weird Ouija board. Don't like that one.
Yeah, it is a shame. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's a shame that the fate that thing has seen, because otherwise it'd be very fascinating, but it's very warped now.
Yeah.
And Yeah.
But I mean, we already have so many of these old toys and everything already look kind of creepy, and so it's good to weed through and not show too many of the creepy ones, aside from maybe that one dog.
Oh
Um,
yeah. If this talk had taken place during Halloween time, I I would have had a field day looking for just
yeah.
frankly horrifying objects that we have.
So let's see. So we have a question from somebody. How about dolls? Paper dolls or doll houses?
Oh, doll houses. That was actually one of the categories that I had planned on initially bringing into this talk, but we have such a huge collection of dollhouse accessories, dolls itself, houses itself, some of which we're still getting, which we actually have to weed through, accessories, interiors, and things like that. Some of those doll houses are in rather dire states, sad to say. And honestly, the collection of dollhouse paraphernalia that we have is so expansive that that would have to be split into its own separate talk, which I have no doubts will probably be coming in the future, if at all possible. But if I had included it in this toy talk, it would have run for much longer than this one did. It would clock in well past the 40-minute mark, which is already going into overtime for what I initially planned for this. But I feel like going into detail of what the objects that I brought in here was much more vital. So the doll talk can be a separate thing, but that we have plenty of. So
Yeah, I will say we if many of you have been to the museum in the past, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, you might remember we used to have a doll room and a toy room per se. And actually we ended up actually deaccessioning a lot of the dolls from the collection. We still have a few in our collection, but definitely a far less than I think we used to have. As far as the general collection the museum was concerned, they didn't particularly pertain to our collection. So we found better homes for them where they'd be more preciously enjoyed. Um, but like Zach said, we just recently took in a dollhouse that I actually packaged up myself in someone's home, and yeah, there's so many just little tiny bits and bobs from each one. I mean, you could do a whole talk just about the one dollhouse showing off they had little fake eggs for the refrigerator, and they had little ice cube trays and little tiny candles. It was a lot. But
mind
let's see.
blowing the amount of detail that goes into those.
Yeah. Um, our boss, Tom Edmonds, was asking, he said it was very interesting, and he was asking if there's any other theme in our collection, Zach, that you would maybe think about doing a talk like this on, just another sort of, I guess, deep dive.
Deeper deep dive. Specifically in, first of all, thank you very much, Tom. Means a lot. Um, let's see, deeper deep dive. Do you mean, of course, with the objects that I covered in this talk in particular, or like other sort of either
Anything
doll
in
or
general
like
of
toy adjacent things?
the theme of any sort of theme that you could find in our collection at the museum that you would enjoy doing a bigger talk on, perhaps maybe portraits or textiles or anything like that.
Um, Definitely portraits. I think portraits would be the ideal one to have coming about into the future. I think. I swear, when I was going through a lot of those toys, there were probably other what is it, categories that I unfortunately had to push to the side, only for not only for the sake of keeping this talk as succinct as I possibly could, but also because there's a lot of missing pieces for some of those toys that, like, without them I would not be able to like go into as deep enough of a dive as I would want to, honestly, to give those objects in our collection justice. But that is an interesting question, and it's definitely something I would be thinking about, because I do enjoy doing these lectures, and they're very fascinating, given the subject matter, such as for this, for example.
Sorry, I muted myself. The last question we have
No worries.
here is, um, do we have any toys in our collection that are from the Shinnecock Reservation?
The Shinnecock Reservation.
And I'll say I don't think that we do in particular. I know we do have some items in our collection that are of Shinnecock origin, but I don't believe we have anything that's like a toy specifically.
Yeah, I'm as I was going through the collection of Shinnecock related objects and indigenous objects that we have in our museum, they're much more utility based than there definitely are toys, because I've not seen any toys really in any of the collections that I was pouring through, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, either way, this was a great talk. I mean, most of this stuff we usually pull out and decorate the museum during the holiday season with all the Christmas trees and things like that, which unfortunately we probably won't be able to have done too much this year. So this was a great way for people to get to see all these sorts of toys that we usually pull out now, shown on this talk. So I think hopefully everybody enjoyed this. Hopefully everybody else signs up for our future programmings on our website, southamptonhistory.org. And we will see you guys next time. Thank you, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.